Welcome to my channel. Today's scary story is called The Doll That Watched at Midnight. This story comes from our community, so let's jump into the story now. A young woman named Amelia had just inherited her great-grandmother's old Victorian home. It was massive, filled with antique furniture and decor, and it was definitely going to need a lot of work. But that was all fine with Amelia. She had always dreamed of owning a home like this. And although it felt strange walking through the halls by herself, she loved every creaky floorboard and cobweb corner. On her first night alone in the house, Amelia decided to go exploring in the attic. The air was thick with dust, and when she turned on the single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, its light glinted off something sitting on a trunk. It was an old porcelain doll dressed in a long white nightgown. Its hair was matted and dirty, and its eyes were wide open and staring directly at her. She could feel her heart beating faster as she realized how creepy the doll was. But she couldn't look away. Something about the doll's vacant stare was pulling her closer, and as she got closer, she noticed that the doll's eyes were unblinking. Uncomfortable with how eerie the scene was becoming, she turned to leave. But then she heard it, coming from the doll. Was a very faint giggle? The sound sent shivers down her spine, and she ran from the room. The next day, Amelia went back to the attic with a cloth to wipe down the doll. As she brushed the dirt and grime from its face, she couldn't shake the feeling that the doll's eyes were following her movements. Once she had it clean, she cradled the doll in her arms. Its head tilted slightly as if recognizing her, and it made her drop the doll. Startled, night fell and she sat alone in her room, the only light coming from the flickering lamp on her knit stand. Suddenly, she heard footsteps echoing up the stairs. She froze and listened intently. The footsteps seemed to be getting louder. Then they stopped right outside her door. Heart pounding, she watched the doorknob slowly turn. The next morning, she found a small note stuck behind a frame leaning against the wall. It simply said, "Play with me." Confused, she shrugged off the note, assuming it was some sort of sick joke. That night, however, the doll appeared downstairs, seated in a chair by the fireplace. There was no explanation, no sign of how it got there. It was just there. Startled, she screamed, and the doll did not move. Still, in the morning, the doll was gone, and she never saw it again, or so she thought. Later that night, her phone vibrated sharply on the table beside her. Startled, she looked down to see a new text message on the screen. The message read, "You broke me." Frozen in fear, she could only watch as the message was followed by another, "I'm here now." She screamed and threw the phone across the room, but the message had vanished. Then she heard footsteps on the stairs. They climbed one step at a time, slow and deliberate. Then they stopped right outside her door. She pressed her ear against the wood, listening intently. She could hear the doorknob rattling, but it wasn't turning. Then she heard a faint voice whispering, "Let me in, please," she screamed, burying her face in her hands. Suddenly, the light snapped off and the room was plunged into darkness. Silence filled the room and she could hear the sound of the doll hitting the floor. She whimpered, waiting for whatever was going to happen next. Then she felt something cold and slimy brush against her arm. She screamed, jumping back. She could hear the doll hitting the floor again. Slowly, ever so slowly, the doll's porcelain hand drifted toward her. Panic seized her, and she backed away, tripping over her own feet. She could feel the doll's gaze boring into her, and a whisper echoed in her ear, "Don't leave me. Please stay." She screamed, scrambling away from the door. She could hear the doll getting closer, its footsteps soft yet somehow menacing. The doorknob rattled once more, and she squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for it to open, but it didn't. Instead, she heard the whisper again, this time closer, "Please don't be afraid." She opened her eyes to see the doll standing in the doorway, its porcelain face illuminated by the moonlight. Its eyes glowed an eerie red, and she screamed, stumbling backward. The doll took a step forward, and she fell to the floor. It reached out a hand and she cried out, instinctively slapping it away. She scrambled back, knocking over a nearby table. She grabbed the doll and held it up. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, her voice shaking. The doll's eyes glowed brighter. "I am not in the toy box anymore," it whispered. She could feel the doll's grip tightening on her wrist, and she tried to pull away, but it was no use. The doll's grip was like iron. She screamed as the doll began to drag her towards the stairs. Morning sunlight spilled across the floor, illuminating a shattered doll lying on the ground. The windows were open and the curtains billowing gently in the breeze. Her phone lay on the knit stand, still buzzing softly. On the screen, a new message from the doll blinked. "She's come for you next." So, I hope you enjoyed that scary story. If you did, we have plenty more where that came from. If you want to hear more stories, make sure you subscribe so you're notified every time we upload a new story. Also, if you enjoy creepypasta, check out our podcast where we publish extra bonus episodes. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.